Jesus, could my handwriting get any worse? Okay, time to make sense out of all this shit. Welcome to the DVD Shelf Movie Reviews, where movies are celebrated, not incinerated. Cut to clip.
I'd been on my own for a while, and that's when I started following. I started to follow people, somebody at random, somebody who didn't know who I was. I'd just see where they went, what they did, go home afterwards. And when it stopped being random, that's when it started to go wrong.
In his very first feature film outing, writer and director Christopher Nolan delivers Following, a strong contemporary film noir tale told in a one-of-a-kind nonlinear format that has since become a trademark in his filmmaking style. The movie constantly jumps back and forth between two timelines as the mystery unfolds, keeping you guessing what will happen next, or before, or whatever. So, here we have the DVD for Following. And it has a small but informative offering of special features. First off, we get a feature-length commentary from Christopher Nolan himself, which is a good listen for an inspiring filmmaker since it lays out in great detail how he created his very first feature film with almost no budget. Also, you can watch the entire film as you read Nolan's original shooting script and listen to the dialogue as it goes along so you can compare how the script reads to the final dialogue spoken in the film. Lastly, you can actually choose to watch the film where it's restructured to play the story chronologically without jumping back and forth between timelines. Additionally, the DVD also features cast and crew biographies and trailers for both Following and Memento. So, with Christopher Nolan being one of today's top directors, it's interesting to go back and check out his very first film, especially when so many people mistakenly think Memento was his first film and don't even know Following exists. The film might be a little rough around the edges in the visuals department, but given the backstory of how this film had to be shot, can you blame it? For a movie with no budget, it certainly has far more entertainment value than most films with a $200 million budget, which is simply a testament to Nolan's talent as a director, screenwriter, and storyteller. That being said, I'll have to give the Following DVD a 5 out of 5 discs rating. This is a must-own movie.
Sounds like a compliment.
Well, that'll about do it for today's episode of the DVD Shelf Movie Reviews. Thanks for joining me today as we took this rather unique look into the massive and impressive filmography of one of the greatest and most consistent filmmakers of our generation. And given his, in my opinion anyway, flawless track record, I will always be looking forward to see what tricks Christopher Nolan has up his sleeve for his future projects. So, I'll see you next time, but for now, this one's going back on the DVD shelf. Over the past decade or so, Christopher Nolan has become one of Hollywood's most successful filmmakers with his engaging, manipulative storytelling and striking visuals. In this episode, we'll take a look at how Nolan was able to gather the resources to make his first film, along with how it paved the way for his later achievements. We'll explore Nolan's career since Following, which will take us from the gritty streets of Gotham City all the way to the deepest and darkest corners of the human psyche. Then I'll go over the special features on the Following DVD and give my final recommendation. Now, every movie I feature on my show, I automatically recommend it to all of you. But of course, not every film is recommended to the same degree. That's where this rating scale comes in handy to help illustrate how strongly I recommend it, ranging from 1 disc being just download it, all the way to 5 discs being a must-own movie. So now, let's discover Christopher Nolan's Following. Directed by Christopher Nolan and starring Jeremy Theobald, Alex Haw, Lucy Russell, and John Nolan. It was produced by Next Wave Films and made its theatrical debut at the Toronto International Film Festival on September 12, 1998, and it was released on DVD on December 11, 2001. In early 2011, The Dark Knight Rises officially went into production, even though initially Christopher Nolan was hesitant to make a third Batman film. After the death of Heath Ledger, and believing that a third installment in a series of films typically tends to disappoint, Nolan wanted to move on from the Batman movies to do other projects. But in early 2010, it was announced that Nolan's next film after Inception would be a third and final Batman film that would put an end cap on Nolan's Batman story. After his scene-stealing supporting role in Inception, Tom Hardy gained 30 pounds of muscle and shaved his head when he was cast as the bulked-up terrorist known only as Bane. Academy Award nominee Anne Hathaway was chosen to play the role of Catwoman, and based on these early photos, her costume seems to resemble more of the 1966 TV series Catwoman, played by Julie Newmar, than the costumes the villainess wears in more contemporary comics and films. Principal photography for The Dark Knight Rises began in the spring of 2011 and shot in such globe-trotting locations as India, New York, London, and Pittsburgh. After utilizing Chicago for Gotham City in the first two films, Pittsburgh was used as Gotham's stand-in this time around. The IMAX cameras were used a bit more heavily in this film than in The Dark Knight, and with Nolan and cinematographer Wally Pfister making it clear that it would not be shot in 3D. Praise the Lord. This highly anticipated conclusion to Nolan's Batman trilogy will hit theaters in July of 2012. So, here we have the DVD for Following. Starting at around age 7, London-born Christopher Nolan would play around with his action figures and his father's 8mm camera to create short movies. Nolan was a dual citizen of both the UK and the US and spent much of his early life living in both London and Chicago. His younger brother Jonathan is a writer and will collaborate with Christopher on several of his future film projects. Nolan attended University College London in the UK and majored in English literature, only attending the college so he could take advantage of their student filmmaking labs and facilities. He was the president of the university's Film Society and would shoot short experimental films with the available 16mm cameras. It was also while attending University College London that he met his girlfriend Emma Thomas, a fellow member of the school's Film Society. Since 1997, Nolan and Thomas have been married and have 4 kids. Thomas has either produced or co-produced all of Nolan's films since. In the early 90s, Nolan graduated from University College London, but continued to associate himself with the college's Film Society. It was there that Nolan befriended Jeremy Theobald, who starred in a couple of Nolan's short films he shot during his tenure at the Film Society, including Larceny in 1996 and Doodlebug in 1997. In his 3-minute-long Doodlebug short, you can see that Nolan is trying his hand at atmospheric filmmaking with a bit of visual flair, 2 components that will become key in his later films. With the staggering success of The Dark Knight, Christopher Nolan was able to parlay this accomplishment into the development of a completely new and original idea he had been tinkering with for nearly a decade or so by this point. Warner Bros. Studios was confident in Nolan's ability to not only make an engaging film, but a mega blockbuster that could make millions upon millions of dollars at the box office, so they greenlit his next film, the 2010 sci-fi action movie Inception. This gamble proved to be a smart move once Inception was released that summer and took in over $800 million at the worldwide box office. The film was nominated for 8 Academy Awards, including Best Picture of 2010 and Best Original Screenplay for Christopher Nolan. It went on to win 4 of those awards, all in technical categories including Best Visual Effects and Best Cinematography for Nolan's longtime cinematographer, Wally Pfister. The film starred Leonardo DiCaprio as a corporate spy and thief named Cobb, whom Nolan interestingly decided to name after the thief character in Following. Cobb has an uncompromised ability to plant ideas into a person's subconscious through their dreams via an unexplained briefcase apparatus. Along with DiCaprio, the film featured a stellar cast including Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Tom Hardy, and Ellen Page. Nolan reunited with several stars from his Batman films, Michael Caine, Cillian Murphy, and Ken Watanabe. In early 2011, The Dark Knight Rises officially went into production, even though initially Christopher Nolan was hesitant to make a third Batman film. Okay, that takes care of that page. Now, what do we have here? 2 components that will become key in his later films. Okay. While making his early experimental short films, Christopher Nolan had a full-time day job of creating corporate training videos that he called great practice when it came to quick and efficient video production. More confident in his filmmaking experience, Nolan began writing a feature-length script. He wrote the script with every intention of making a film the cheapest way possible, since he had no real budget to speak of, and the majority of the funding for this project came straight out of the paychecks from his corporate gigs. The biggest expense for this project was the 16mm film reels, which he realized he had to use sparingly by shooting only 1 or 2 takes for each scene, and he achieved this by rehearsing with his actors for a good 6 months before photography even began. In the summer of 2006, it was publicly confirmed that Christopher Nolan would return to direct the sequel to Batman Begins, and that it would be titled The Dark Knight. After the cliffhanger ending to Batman Begins, everyone knew the Joker would become the main antagonist in a sequel, so the excitement was more focused on who would be cast as the Joker. And to much surprise, Oscar nominee Heath Ledger was chosen to play the Clown Prince of Crime, an unlikely candidate based on some of his previous roles. Completely disappearing into the part, Ledger brought to the big screen a terrifying performance that paid homage to the classic comic book character while bringing something fresh to the table. But when the film was released in the summer of 2008, people were not only praising his Oscar-worthy performance, but still mourning the actor's untimely death earlier that year. Ledger's take on the Joker quickly became one of the most celebrated villainous portrayals in cinema history, even winning him a posthumous Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. The film itself went on to break box office records and is widely considered to be the greatest comic book-inspired film of all time. Added to the cast was Aaron Eckhart as likable District Attorney Harvey Dent, who eventually meets a grisly fate at the hands of the Joker, turning him into the psychotic vigilante Two-Face. Cillian Murphy's Scarecrow returned from Batman Begins for a brief appearance towards the beginning of the film. Also returning from Batman Begins was Christian Bale, Gary Oldman, Michael Caine, and Morgan Freeman. The role of Rachel Dawes, however, was recast as Maggie Gyllenhaal stepped in for Katie Holmes, putting Rachel in the middle of a love triangle with Bruce Wayne and Harvey Dent. After the enjoyable experience of filming scenes for Batman Begins in the city of Chicago, Christopher Nolan returned to the Windy City to film even more for The Dark Knight. Only this time, cinematographer Wally Pfister wanted to push the envelope for the sequel by filming approximately 30 minutes of the film with the massive IMAX cameras. With the staggering success of The Dark Knight, Christopher Nolan was able to parlay this accomplishment into the development of a completely new and original idea he had been tinkering with for nearly a decade or so by this point. Knowing that he wasn't going to be able to create any expensive, stunning visuals, Nolan knew when writing this script that the most dynamic aspect of the film had to be the story, or more specifically, how the story was told. Nolan devised a non-linear format where the scenes played out of order, and by doing this you're learning about the characters strictly through their actions. If their actions play out of order, then you're forced to constantly reassess your impression of each character as the film plays out. Also, there was no extra money to pay for lighting equipment, so a lot of shots were filmed next to windows and in the daylight so the natural light could illuminate each scene. Fellow University Film Society member Jeremy Theobald read the script and agreed to not only star in the film, but to also help Nolan produce it, which in part meant helping to search for actors to fill the supporting roles. Theobald brought in a couple of his college acquaintances with stage acting experience, while several friends and fellow Film Society members came on as the production crew for the film. This page is done. It wasn't so bad. Nolan's work on The Prestige actually dates all the way back to late 2000, following the production of Memento. While touring the UK promoting Memento, Nolan was given The Prestige, a 1995 novel written by British author Christopher Priest. The book tells the tale of two rivaling magicians in London at the dawn of the 20th century, and the material was right up Nolan's alley. Several directors showed interest in adapting The Prestige, but author Christopher Priest personally wanted Nolan to direct due to his love for Following and Memento. While knee-deep in the post-production for Insomnia in 2001, Nolan had his brother Jonathan work on the script for The Prestige, beginning a long 5-year process of working out the story details. Even though they were merely adapting this existing story, they went through numerous rewrites, putting their own signature stamp on how the non-linear story would play out. By 2003, Nolan was ready to direct The Prestige, but Batman Begins was fast-tracked into production, so Nolan had to put The Prestige off to the side. Once Batman Begins was later released, Nolan brought back Christian Bale and Michael Caine to co-star in The Prestige with Hugh Jackman, Scarlett Johansson, and David Bowie. The film was finally released in the fall of 2006 to positive reviews. While filming The Prestige, the Nolan brothers, Christian Bale, and Michael Caine would hold powwows to toss around ideas and suggestions for a sequel to Batman Begins. In the summer of 2006, it was publicly confirmed that Christopher Nolan would return to direct the sequel to Batman Begins, and that it would be titled The Dark Knight. Following begins with Bill, an unemployed writer, roaming the crowded streets of London as he lends us an off-camera voiceover where he explains a bit of his own backstory. We learn that he's made a hobby out of going out into the streets, picking a random person out of the crowd, and simply begin to follow them. He wasn't a stalker or a pervert. He was just curious to see where a stranger went and what they did. Then he'd go home, claiming that he was doing it as research for characters in the stories he writes. Bill's voiceover turns out to be a conversation he's having with an older man, who turns out to be a detective interrogating Bill. This character is played by Christopher Nolan's uncle, John Nolan. We watch as Bill follows his latest subject around town and eventually into a coffee shop. The man soon sits down at Bill's table and demands to know who Bill is and why he's following him, leaving Bill to awkwardly explain himself. Intrigued by Bill, the man reveals himself to be a burglar named Cobb. Not your typical thief, Cobb enjoys the idea of violating the personal space of any random individual and rooting through their possessions to assess what type of person they are. And seeing that he and Bill may have certain common interests in people per se, Cobb invites Bill along on his next robbery. Following their first shared burglary, the film suddenly jump cuts to an alternate timeline with a more clean-cut and well-dressed Bill. He enters a bar and sits down at the counter where he spots an attractive blonde and decides to join her. For reasons yet unknown, Bill introduces himself with a different name.
My name's Daniel Lloyd. My friends call me Danny.
So?
At first, the woman is a bit standoffish, claiming that she's dating the owner of the bar, but after a little back and forth, Bill takes her back to his apartment where he curiously inquires the woman about her so-called boyfriend. After explaining that the bar owner is a dangerous mobster, she begins to feel a bit uneasy and leaves. The film soon cuts back to our original timeline where, once again, Bill has his longer hair and beard. Curious to see Cobb's deduction skills at work, Bill brings Cobb to his own apartment, never letting him know it's actually his place. Cobb assumes that only an unemployed loser must live here based on the layout of the place and what little he owns. Cobb decides that he doesn't want to steal anything from some jobless bum, so they leave, with Bill obviously feeling insulted. As the film continues on, it constantly jumps back and forth between the different timelines in true Christopher Nolan style, and as the story unfolds in multiple directions, you begin to question who to trust. What will eventually come of Bill now that he's been lured into this criminal underworld? You'll just have to watch and see. With the critical and commercial success Nolan and Warner Brothers received with Insomnia, Nolan went to Warner Brothers and pitched his take on reinvigorating the long-dormant Batman franchise. After the box office bombing of 1997's Batman and Robin, Warner Brothers was cautious about bringing Batman back to the big screen unless it was done right. Over the years, many directors had set up various projects to do so, but they all fell through until late 2002 when Nolan won over Warner Brothers with his ideas for a new Batman origin story that would completely disregard the 4 films from the late 80s and 90s. Christian Bale was cast as young billionaire Bruce Wayne, who has yet to become Batman. Michael Caine was cast as his butler and father figure Alfred Pennyworth. Gary Oldman played Police Lieutenant James Gordon. Morgan Freeman was cast as Lucius Fox, a scientist at Wayne Enterprises and the supplier of Batman's gear. Katie Holmes was cast as Bruce Wayne's childhood love interest and Gotham City Assistant District Attorney Rachel Dawes. Cillian Murphy was cast as the Scarecrow, an evil doctor who uses an aerosol-based toxin to instill fearful hallucinations in his victims, while Liam Neeson portrayed Ra's al Ghul, the evil head of the League of Shadows, a mysterious organization of vigilante ninjas. Filming took place in 2004 in locations such as Iceland, England, and Chicago. Nolan shot portions of the film in Chicago as the stand-in for Gotham City, grounding the film in a gritty urban reality and veering away from the gothic look of previous Batman films. This was Nolan's biggest film yet, and was certainly ambitious for both him and cinematographer Wally Pfister, but Nolan's signature storytelling touches were still visible. To squeeze Batman's rich origin story into a 2.5-hour film, Nolan played with time and flashbacks as we got glimpses of the murder of Bruce Wayne's parents as a young boy, and Bruce's later college years while traveling the world. Released in June of 2005, Batman Begins was a hit worldwide, and with the reveal of a mysterious Joker card in an evidence bag at the end of the film, the audience's excitement was only heightened for an inevitable sequel. After the release of Batman Begins, Christopher Nolan went on to direct the 2006 thriller The Prestige. The filming for Following took around 3 to 4 months to complete, with the entire cast and crew also having real day jobs. Filming could only take place on Saturdays, where about 15 minutes worth of footage was shot each week. Options for filming locations were limited since the crew couldn't afford permits that would allow them to legally shoot in private urban areas around London, even though Nolan wanted the film to take place within the city. Most of the film is actually shot in only a handful of locations, including actor Jeremy Theobald's own apartment flat that doubled as Bill's home in the film, and a bar owned by a friend of Theobald's. The home of Christopher Nolan's parents was used as the woman's residence, which, ironically, was actually burglarized during production, where some of the props from the film were stolen, but luckily nothing really important. Most of the extras you see populating the backgrounds of the scenes are crew members. However, bigger scenes with large crowds were just everyday people completely unaware that a small film crew was in the middle of shooting a movie. Nolan explains that it was nerve-wracking to shoot these scenes because if any of these bystanders would unknowingly look right into the camera, the shot would be ruined. To keep these kinds of scenes to a minimum, many outdoor shots you'll notice are shot on rooftops. This way, Nolan could get some great exterior shots of the city of London while avoiding random people ruining takes, along with evading any traffic noise and downtown ambient sound that could possibly ruin the audio track. Break time. Memento became very successful worldwide, putting Christopher Nolan on Hollywood's radar, leading him to direct his first major studio film, Insomnia, in 2002, which was a loose remake of a 1997 Norwegian film of the same name. Al Pacino plays Will Dormer, an ace LA homicide detective who, along with his partner, is summoned up to the small town of Night Mute, Alaska, to investigate the murder of a local teenage girl. However, Dormer and his partner arrive in Alaska at the time of year where the sun never sets, resulting in 24 hours of constant daylight, causing Dormer to lose sleep. With his sleep loss causing him to lose focus, Dormer accidentally shoots and kills his partner during a fog-covered stakeout. Following the incident, Dormer keeps it to himself, instilling a paralyzing guilt which, when mixed with a lack of sleep, only causes him to become more and more unhinged as he continues to investigate the girl's murder. Robin Williams plays crime novelist Walter Finch, who, as it turns out, witnessed the entire incident. Finch out and out confesses to Dormer that he unintentionally killed the girl in a violent fit of rage, but Dormer's hands are tied since Finch has Dormer's secret hanging over his head, a stalemate for two accidental murderers. Insomnia was released in May of 2002. At this point in his career, Christopher Nolan may have had indie success with Following and Memento, but his name still wasn't quite big enough to sell this film to a mainstream audience, so the hype for Insomnia was more built around Robin Williams, and this being one of 3 very dark performances he turned in throughout that year. Along with playing a killer in Insomnia, he also played psychopaths in both the dark comedy Death to Smoochie and the psychological thriller 1 Hour Photo. Filmed on location in the state of Alaska, Insomnia was the second collaboration between Nolan and cinematographer Wally Pfister after Memento. Pfister's beautiful cinematography in Insomnia captures the icy, desolate landscapes and small-town feel the locations had to offer, which gives the crime thriller a more unique and naturalistic feel as opposed to the more typical flashy films of this genre. Pfister's eye for the sweeping, icy blue landscapes he filmed for Insomnia prepared him for the next collaboration between him and Christopher Nolan, which will become their most ambitious project yet. Oh, much better. Now, where was I? An interesting little Easter egg you'll notice while watching Following is whenever we see the front door of Bill's apartment, we can clearly see, of all things, a Batman logo on his door, making more superstitious people believe that Nolan directing Batman movies was always in the cards. But in reality though, it's just a bizarre coincidence. Being that it was Jeremy Theobald's actual apartment at the time, he was simply a Batman fan who just happened to have an old sticker on his front door that they never bothered removing before filming these scenes. Later on in Nolan's Memento, another Batman logo shows up in the background. The inside of the apartment clearly looks empty and depressing, But Theobald didn't actually live like that. Furniture was either emptied out or rearranged, and the walls were roughed up to make the apartment feel lower class. They moved out Theobald's computer for the time being, since an out-of-work writer at this time surely couldn't afford a nice computer, so Theobald's writer character would occasionally be seen typing on an old typewriter, the same exact typewriter Nolan, in fact, used to type the script for Following. The idea for Memento was initially conceived in the late 90s when Christopher Nolan's brother Jonathan pitched him a short story idea he'd been toying with for a while. Later on, Jonathan wrote a first draft for his story and sent it to Christopher, who, in turn, wrote a screenplay based off of it. Just like the short story, Christopher Nolan's movie follows two separate timelines, but he decided to tell one of the timelines in reverse chronological order, while a black and white secondary timeline plays in the correct order and the two meet in the middle of the film's finale. The film starred Guy Pearce as Leonard, a man with short-term memory loss who is on the hunt to find the killer of his wife. He tattoos his body and leaves himself notes to help him remember things and keep track of his mission to find the killer. Nolan's decision to partly tell this story backwards was highly praised for its originality and how it pushed the limits on structuring a film's narrative. Once Memento was completed, Nolan had a tough time trying to get his strange little film distributed in the United States, so he took it to various European film festivals where it found its audience. With its overseas critical acclaim, Memento finally got released in the US in 2001, where it was later nominated for 2 Oscars in Best Original Screenplay and Film Editing. Memento became very successful worldwide, putting Christopher Nolan on Hollywood's radar, leading him to direct his first major studio film, Insomnia, in 2002. After Following, Jeremy Theobald graduated from University College London with a degree in physiology. Still residing in the UK, Theobald mostly steered away from acting and has since become an editor of various medical journals focusing on pathology and disease control. Following was actress Lucy Russell's very first film role. She has since starred in various film, stage, and television productions worldwide. Alex Haw never pursued acting. He graduated from Princeton with a master's degree in architecture and has since worked at various notable architectural practices in both the UK and the US. Collectively, Nolan would bring back Theobald, Russell, and his uncle John Nolan for very brief appearances in his later film, Batman Begins. After Following was completed, Nolan entered it into film festivals, making its premiere to the public at the Toronto International Film Festival in the fall of 1998. Instantly, buzz began to grow for this tiny film, which only got greater after several more film festival premieres during the course of 1999. That year, Following played at the Slamdance Film Festival, a showcasing of films made by first-time directors for under $1 million that neighbors and simultaneously runs with the famous Sundance Film Festival in Park City, Utah. While showing the film at Slamdance, Nolan met cinematographer Wally Pfister and was impressed with Pfister's cinematography in The High Line, a film that was playing in Sundance. After being his own cinematographer on Following, Nolan knew he wasn't interested in that department and personally chose Pfister to be his cinematographer on his next project. Wally Pfister has been the cinematographer on every single Nolan-directed film since. Once Christopher Nolan's name became more well-known from doing the film festival circuit with Following, he was able to begin his next project with New Market Films. Following's unique style of storytelling would only be a warm-up for his next film, the 2000 psychological thriller, Memento.